Hi, I am Casey Krebs, and today I am going to be teaching you how to make a challah. Challah is a type of bread, and it's a really delicious bread, and I will be teaching you how to make the dough and also how to braid the dough. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to get 2 cups of lukewarm water, so just a little bit more than lukewarm. So I have 2 cups here, and the reason we want warm water is we want to activate the yeast. So we're going to pour that into our bowl. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to get our yeast, and we are going to add 4.5 teaspoons of yeast into our lukewarm water. Once the yeast is in our lukewarm water, it's going to activate it. So we're going to make sure it's alive, and if you have live yeast, that means it'll work, and your dough will rise and bubble, and you know you'll have good dough at the end of it. Now, in order to help this activate, this recipe calls for 3/4 cups of sugar. So we are going to take our 3/4 cups of sugar, bring it over here, but we're only going to take a pinch of it and add it to the yeast and the water to help the yeast activate. Now, we're not going to pour all this in now. We're just going to take a pinch of the sugar, a couple pinches. We're going to let this sit for about 15 minutes, and you'll see that your water starting to bubble a bit, your yeast is starting to bubble. That's how you know your yeast is alive and active, and then we can add the rest of the ingredients in. We'll just give everything a bit of a stir, and we will come back to this in a little bit and see if our yeast is activated. Okay, so our yeast has bloomed. See here, it's nice and puffed up. It looks kind of like that. So now we can add in all the rest of the ingredients. So first we're going to add in the rest of the sugar. So we did take a couple pinches out of the 3/4 of the cup sugar. So we're going to add the rest in now. And we'll just stir this a bit. Next we're going to add in 1/2 cup of vegetable oil. So you can use canola oil or any kind of vegetable oil, any flavorless oil. Next we have 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. We're going to add in 2 eggs. And I just like to stir this up a bit before I add in the flour. And so the flour part's interesting. We're gonna start with 4 cups of flour, and then after that, we're gonna add in 3 to 3.5 more cups. Depending on your elevation, depending on the weather, the humidity, the flour will change each time you make it. So the amounts will really be by look and by feel. So we'll start by adding in, I'm gonna add in a little bit at a time. So if you don't have a mixer like this, what you can do is just mix it with a fork until it gets thick enough that you can knead it by hand. And I'll show you what that will look like when we get there. And then we are just going to put it on low and let the flour incorporate so it doesn't get all over the place. About 1 or 2. Let it incorporate while I gradually add in more flour. While that's mixing, I'm gonna measure out 3 to 3.5 more cups of flour. We're gonna keep mixing here for a bit. Start gradually adding the rest of the flour in. So if you can see, it's very sticky still, very sticky. We wanna continue adding our flour in. This is the dough now. Still a little bit sticky, it's sticking to my hands. So I'm gonna add the rest of this flour in. I'm gonna reserve some of this though. I'm gonna let the machine knead it for about 10 minutes. And then I'll show you after how to knead it by hand as well. So we'll let this knead for about 10 minutes. And then I will see you back here again once we have a nice ball of dough. So once this is done in your machine, your dough will look like this. But if you want it, and it's all kneaded and it's ready to go. But if you wanna see how to knead, if you don't have a machine and you want it to knead, all you do is you just press down like so. The more you knead, the more glutinous your bread will be. So it'll be that nice, stretchy, pulley, yummy texture. And you just knead the dough for about 10 minutes or so. So if you have a machine and it's already kneaded, you don't really have to do too much kneading, but if you're kneading by hand, knead for about 10 minutes. Okay, once you have your dough all kneaded, you wanna put it in a round bowl. Then get another glass bowl, and I already put some oil in the bottom. You want to oil the bottom so your dough doesn't stick. So you'll just place your ball right in, and then move it around so the oil spreads all over. So what you want to do is take a cloth and just cover it lightly so it doesn't dry out the dough inside. Leave it in a warm spot for 1.5 to 2 hours. Let it double in size. Then we'll come back and we'll actually shape the bread. If you want to save your dough overnight, you want to wrap it in saran wrap and put it in the fridge. And it'll do a slow rise overnight. And then you can bring it out to room temperature the next morning, and then we can form the bread from the dough then. Otherwise, you can form your bread from the dough in 1.5 to 2 hours once it rises. So I'll see you once my dough has doubled in size.